You're ready for this? Yo, who's the daddy? Easy guys, Dom here from Cringy Dad Gaming. So, in this video we're going to be taking a look at some of the more advanced graphical settings within Watch Dogs Legion. And this is mainly for people who are running an NVIDIA card, because there's a setting in there called Dlss, which I'm just going to show you now, which is classed as Deep Learning Super Sampling, which it says is an NVIDIA RTX technology which uses AI to boost frame rates and generate beautiful sharp images. I don't necessarily agree with that at the moment, because when I'm using this at the moment it actually reduces the sharpness of images depending on which setting. However, it can increase the performance of the ray tracing. So in my last video, which was showing you the optimal video settings that I was using in the game to be able to get a good balance between higher frame rates, averaging around 60 frames per second, and the higher quality settings. Now I'm running an RTX 2070, which is a relatively decent card. It's not one of the best ones at this point, but it's not bad. So what we're going to do is a little live test while I'm recording the voiceover. We're going to fiddle around with some of those settings and just see if we can see a difference in the performance and the overall quality. Now, bear in mind that what you see on the screen is going to depend on what sort of device you're watching this on. If you're watching it on a mobile phone, you probably won't see anything different really. You probably want to watch this on a large monitor on a PC or a laptop to be able to see the changes in effect. So for those of you who want to see what settings I'm running currently in the game, rather than me going through them all again now, you can just watch that video that I posted on the optimal settings that I was using. So let's get into this then, and let's have a look and see what changes we can get within the game if we now just turn DLSS to performance. So straight away, as soon as I put performance on, I notice a slight dip in the sharpness of the overall image, especially around the outside. If you kind of have a look around where the underground sign is to the left of my head, for me on my screen, it looks like there's some chromatic aberration type effect being added to it, which is kind of like a color fringing where the sharpness kind of gets slightly blurred. And that is an effect that actually is used in games sometimes to add a kind of weird sheen effect. However, this hasn't really affected my frame rate massively. Like, it's jumped up literally about 6 frames per second. I know that might be substantial for some people, that's 6 frames per second, but for me, because I was already getting around 60 frames per second, that hasn't really done much in terms of the performance overall, but has affected the graphical quality. So now if I turn it off, for me that underground sign now has become a lot clearer, it's less blurry. The overall image quality has improved. So you may get better performance out of that setting by a slight margin, but I'm not gonna lose that overall sharpness just for an extra 6 frames per second. But what we are going to do now with performance on is we're going to test now ray tracing at medium. Now, if you've not got an RTX card, then you won't have access to this. For those of you who have, you may have noticed if you watched my last video that this actually halved my frame rate by putting ray tracing on. It went from 60 frames per second down to 30 frames per second. So straight away again with the DLSS turned on, I can notice there's less of a sharper image, especially to distant objects. However, the frame rate for me hasn't dipped as much as it did without using it. So this is really a trade-off, as if you can play the game without that sharper image but have the nicer shiny reflections. Now the ray tracing does look fantastic. Like that bus going past then, you could see the bus, the reflection of it in the windows as it went past. It's really quite realistic reflections, and also the puddles and water will just look a lot nicer in general. There will be extra sheen on things like the post box here and lamp posts, and just things that have shiny, you will have extra shiny. But again, can I deal with the extra, the loss of image quality? And that's maybe to personal taste, I think. I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong answer to that. What we can do to try and trade that off is have a look in the video settings, but then in image, and see if adding some sharpness to the image will actually help with those blurry edges that I'm getting for the distant objects. So it definitely does increase the image quality slightly, as sharpness does, but you can kind of tell, at least I can kind of tell that I've added 25% sharpness. But we could maybe tweak that a little bit more and just kind of get it to a setting where we're comfortable. What we're going to test now though is we're going to turn ray tracing up, but we're going to turn the sharpness off first. We're going to turn ray tracing up to high. We're going to turn Dlss up to quality. So this should give us a better picture without using the extra sharpness. Now straight away I can see this has had a real impact on my frames per second. We dropped down to about 35 frames per second now. Some people might not mind that. I can't stand it personally. It just doesn't look as good or as smooth as the 60 frames plus. And in terms of the difference in quality, I'm not really seeing it myself personally. So I guess I have to go with the fact that the DLSS setting hasn't really done for me what it says on the tin. But we can go with balance next. We can leave ray tracing at high and see what we get out of this. Sorry for the gap in silence there. I'm just letting it all sink in, really, and just kind of concentrating on the imagery. So, again, the image is not as sharp as what it was without the DLSS on, but we do have a slightly higher frame rate now with the ray tracing. So 45 frames per second is what I'm getting currently. Oh, we just bumped up to 47, 48. Again, the frame rate is going to depend on what's going on around you, how many cars there are driving past, the types of lighting. We are at night at the moment, which will affect the lighting effects and things like that. So this could be a totally different outcome within the day. But there's most definitely still a dip in the quality of the graphics for me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the settings again. I'm going to turn ray tracing up to ultra. Although, bearing in mind, it does say that there is a major load increase with the CPU and the GPU. When you look at the actual VRAM usage, it's very slight between each one. Almost like there shouldn't be any difference. We're going to put the DLSS up to ultra performance. This is where I had the most issues with this. It caused a real dip in image quality. I mean, straight away, look how blurry the guy is walking past me there. Look how blurry the underground sign is to my left. I just don't think that's great. To be honest with you, I don't even think that's right. I don't know if that's right or not. I don't know if that's going to do the same for everyone or if it's just an issue. I've checked today to see if there's any updates from NVIDIA. There's not. So I don't know. But yes, the frames per second have gone up and I am getting around 60 frames per second now. But there's a real dip in the image quality. I couldn't play the game like this. This is blurry. This is like GTA 4 blurry. This is not nice. It's like someone smeared Vaseline all over the lens of a camera or something. It's just, yeah, it's not good. So I don't think that's going to work for us. But what I do want to test is now if we turn ray tracing off, but leave the DLSS at ultra performance, what happens? So we've still got the horrible blurry image. Frames per second, we're now getting around 70. So there's only really 10 frames per second increase to what I was getting originally. So Why would I use this setting at this stage? I mean, for some people, that might be a significant increase. For me, it's not enough to warrant that drop in quality. So what we're going to do now is turn that off completely, just in case your eyes have become accustomed to it. And we're going to turn it off completely. And straight away, there's a much crisper image. And I think it's finding that balance, a balance that you are happy with. We've tested what each one looks like at this stage. I think what we could probably get away with, and this is what we're going to test now as maybe a final kind of setting that might be good for those people who are still looking for a balance, is we're going to put ray tracing on. We're going to put it to ultra because, as I've said, there's very little difference in VRAM usage at this stage between the three options. We're going to put Dlss to performance. Now you could tweak some of those settings because I've still got them all at ultra. But again, I did find that these texture resolutions, as much as they changed the VRAM, at this stage, they weren't really making much of a difference in terms of the frame rate for me. The only thing that really changed the frame rate for me was shadows. We could maybe put shadows down to low, and we're going to test that because the shadows between medium and low, it's a very slight difference that you probably wouldn't really notice too much. And one last thing actually, because I am still getting a little bit of blurry edges, it's in the image section. We can actually use some sharpness to maybe try and combat that. So we're going to put it up to 25%. That might be a little bit too much. But that has definitely helped a little bit with those blurry images, although it still looks like there's a chromatic aberration type effect on certain things around the edge. In terms of frame rate, however, we are bouncing around 50 frames per second. So there is a significant difference between 30 and 50. 50 definitely looks a lot smoother than 30 in terms of how things work. I don't know if I'd be happy with that, but that is maybe a last resort option for me at this stage to use ray tracing, and it's definitely better than the 30 frames per second we were getting without the Dlss. So for those of you who wanted to know what the DLS was, when I say DLS, the Dlss was about, then that might have helped give you a deeper look into it and what sort of options you may have playing around with those settings. But it is going to be system specific, if I can speak, and everyone's going to be different in terms of what they have as an outcome. But there's my view on it, and we could probably get away with running it like this, I think. So ray tracing on, but using the lower setting of the Dlss. So if you've got any questions, don't forget to pop them in the comments. Let me know what your findings have been on settings and what your overall performance has been. And I will catch you guys on another video. So watch this space for more Watch Dogs Legion, and thanks for watching.
What's coming over me?
This is getting out of hand.
You're ready for this?
Yo, who's the daddy?